Kynan leads silent retreats, teaches one-on-one, and offer courses and run weekly classes. So this will be an interactive session. So Kynan will start with a bit of a meditation, a bit of introduction to the topic, and then he will ask a few questions that will invite your participation, some questions and answers, so that the session is catered to what you'd like to learn about. And so in that interactive session, so please feel free to pop your questions or comments in the chat if you're online. You can also put your hand up to unmute yourself. You can put your hand up and I will ask you to unmute and you can speak directly. Or if you're in person, you can also put your actual hand up and speak as well. So also, if you don't feel comfortable with asking your question in public, you can also message them privately to me. And this session will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So without further ado, over to you, Kynan.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophia. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Darug people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So one thing I've been starting a lot of my sessions with lately is we'll get into a meditation in a minute, but just before we do that, start with a few sighs. So I'll invite you all to just get comfortable wherever you are. And what we'll do is inhale and then exhale and make a sound. It can be any sound you want. Okay, so ready? Inhale. Exhale. Two more. Inhale deeply. And one last one. Inhale. That's better. So yeah, it's great to see you all here. Thanks for being here in the space. Thanks for being online. And it's great to see some familiar faces and some new faces. So what I'm going to do in this session is I'll talk about calm abiding. And so we have this word in the Buddhist tradition, śamatha. Śamatha is the Sanskrit, we get that sh sound. Samatha would be the Pali. So the Buddha did use this word, but it was talked about more in the later tradition. So popularized by Asanga. Technical difficulties. I actually used to be like an electronic musician and work in like audio visual art. So I'm very familiar with technical difficulties. Yeah, okay, continue. Okay, great. So we have this word śamatha, which roughly translates as, or I feel like a good translation is calm abiding. And this fits really well in the Buddhist tradition with the idea of samadhi, collecting the mind, bringing the mind to a quality of unification and alignment and well-being. And so we have specific practices around śamatha, which I'd love to talk to and love to speak about, but also love to discuss with you and to get a sense of where people are at with their practice of stabilizing attention, where you are, where you feel like things are challenging or obstacles to work with, and where you think that there's actually, strength there. There's an ability to do the practice. Love to get into all of that and more. So I'm going to lead a guided meditation, and I actually want to just do a really quick exercise first, and then we'll do a practice based on that. And this is going to be the kind of core idea that I want to convey around shamatha practice. So, okay, put this down. Okay, so very often when we practice meditation, we get told to place our attention on some sensation, or maybe it's a sensation of the body, maybe it's the sensations of associated with the breath, or maybe we choose to focus on a different meditation object. Could be listening to sounds or repeating a mantra. There's many different varieties of this kind of practice. but essentially bringing attention to something in our experience and attempting to stabilize attention. And maybe we could even think about this as borrowing the stability of whatever we're paying attention to. So when we bring attention to the breath, we get this quality of the breath moves in and out in a regular fashion. It changes and it goes, there's variation there, of course, but the cycles of the breath are relatively stable. And then if we follow that for a period of time, we let things simplify and calm down and settle, and the mind becomes focused. We get more of this collectedness, that quality of samadhi. Now, the one thing I want to introduce here is we have that idea of attention, which is what I'm going to be saying is like where we direct the mind, what is in the center of conscious experience. And we could think about this as well as the foreground. But the other idea I want to introduce is that there's also a background to that, which in some texts, it's referred to as awareness. So we actually have a distinction between attention and awareness. And so the little exercise that I want to do first is I want you to so right now, most of you are looking at me or looking at your screen, which I'm on. So just notice where your attention is. Notice, vision is a really good way to know where your attention is. It's usually what you're looking at. You're also welcome to look at anything else, but just direct your attention somewhere. Know what you're looking at. Then what I want you to decide to do is to keep looking where you're looking, but just decide to also notice what's in the periphery, in the background, what's going on around what you're looking at. And see if you can maintain that balance between holding the center relatively still, but also picking up that background, the periphery. Okay, great. Now, next, I want you to actually look slightly away from me. So if you're in the space, look just so that you can see me in the periphery. If you're looking at me on a screen, look just to the side of the screen or above or below the screen. And what I want you to do is do the same thing. Just keep your attention stable and then decide to get the background, decide to open up awareness. Now, just stay in that state, try to see if it's possible to balance those. Then I'm going to wave my arms around and do all this movement. Okay, did you notice that happening as that was going on? Yeah, you could see that in the periphery. Now, let's try this again. Keep your attention stable, looking just to the side of me, and see if it's possible to notice the arms waving, the distraction, and leave it in the background. Just let it come and go in the background while your vision stays stable. So, okay. All right, now come out of that little exercise. Yeah, I guess just maybe I'll pause now before we go into the meditation just to see how that was, if you noticed anything there, if that's familiar, unfamiliar. Yeah, any responses?
I can certainly see that it would be a helpful practice. If you practice that frequently, it could help you stay calm and centered while chaos is happening around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Yeah, yeah, and wouldn't that be nice? The calm, the eye of the storm, I guess, is what we're looking for here. Like the chaos can go on around, but internally or in the mind, there's some degree of okayness or settling. Yeah. Okay, great. Any other responses?
Noticed the tension shifting really quickly to you whilst it came back. So even though it felt like the tension was on the Buddha, that was where my focus was, but it constantly shifted really quickly to what's happening there, and then it's come back really milliseconds.
Yeah, great. That's a really good thing to notice.
Yeah.
So typically in the teaching on shamatha, it's actually at a certain stage where your attention, the detail, the clarity gets to a point where you can notice that attention is actually alternating. It's very rare for attention to just stay exactly with one thing. it will often jump, and then if you're maintaining some stability, it jumps and then jumps back really quickly. And so that's a really good thing to notice. That's actually a very helpful tool for certain stages of practice. And then it's the sort of later stages where you actually want to not let that happen, so to speak. You refine the scope so that attention doesn't move. And I'll talk about the stages and that progression a bit later on. But yeah, that's a great thing to notice, the alternating of attention. Okay. Yeah, just check.
It's nowhere online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's jump into the meditation then and see what a bit of a longer exploration of that reveals. So take your time here, getting set up, getting comfortable. Make any adjustments to your posture that would be helpful. And as you're finding a comfortable position to be in for this meditation, just the reminder to find the balance between being relaxed and alert. So the body is comfortable. You will be able to sit with as little pain and discomfort as possible. But there's also a sense of alertness. And this is greatly helped by uprightness, lengthening in the back. You might even like to imagine the crown of the head being gently pulled upwards. And if there's anything you can do to make your posture even 1% more comfortable, go ahead and do that now. And then when you've found a comfortable position for the body for this meditation, resolve to be as still and quiet as you reasonably can. A still body leads to a still mind. Now, let's begin with opening up awareness. So one of my favorite ways to do this is to listen to sounds. Start by just noticing any sounds that you can hear in the present moment. Hearing the hum of the fan or the electronic devices, the air conditioning. Just gently returning back to listening to sounds. Now, I'd like you to tune in to any sounds that you can hear that are distant quiet, soft. And notice that hearing, the sense of hearing, is wide open. You can hear all around you, in front, behind, to the right, to the left, above, below. Sounds coming from every direction. And if you tune into that quality of openness, or listening to a distant sound, you may get a sense of this open, spacious awareness. You might even find it's helpful to tune into the lack of sound, the silence between sounds, or the silence behind sounds. Good. Now, including also in our awareness, become aware of the sensations of the body. Noticing that all of the sensations of the body are also there in awareness. They're somewhere there in this vast awareness. Notice also that thoughts, emotions, feelings are within this awareness as well. Letting the awareness be open, spacious. And now, with this awareness, I'd like you to simply care about the breath. Decide to take an interest in the breath. Decide to be curious about what those sensations feel like right now. And that could be the breath at the nose, the rise and fall of the abdomen, could be the breath throughout the body. And if the breath doesn't work for you, you're welcome to use any other sensation, any other meditation object. And when you decide to care, to take an interest, to be curious, the breath will move into the center of your conscious experience in most cases. And so now there is the breath in the foreground. Attention is on the breath, and everything else, sounds, body sensations, thoughts, feelings, these are in the background, in awareness. If at any point you feel like you lose either attention or awareness, no problem. Just decide to get it back. Continue on. This might feel a little awkward at first, but just keep coming back. You'll get the hang of it quickly. Good. So you might have noticed that distractions will come up. At some point, attention might jump to something else, or it might start to alternate, moving back and forth between the breath and some distraction, potentially a thought. And here, you may have also noticed that you could keep attention stable and just notice or be aware of the distraction until it passed on its own. And so the idea here is that with practice, distractions can arise in the background and attention doesn't need to move to it. Let it come, let it be, let it go. And this is like you're in a busy cafe with a friend. Even though there's lots of noise, you don't have to tell the other people to be quiet in order to hear what your friend is saying. You can just let that be in the background. Instead, just tune in to your friend's words. And here we tune in to the breath by just allowing it to be in the center. If you can keep attention stable, even just a few seconds at a time, this will help to simplify your experience. The body will relax, the mind will settle, bit by bit. One final instruction. This balance of attention and awareness, foreground and background, sometimes it feels like you're just stepping back a little bit from your meditation object, just so you can keep the sense of the background and not get drawn in too much into the meditation object, into the breath. Sometimes it can be helpful to bring a little more interest to the sensations of the breath. This is sometimes referred to as intensifying. More curiosity, more interest. So if you'd like to try this, just notice some more detail in the sensation of the breath. Notice, if you can, the very beginning of the in-breath, very end of the in-breath, the very beginning of the out-breath, end of the out-breath. Notice the size and shape of the sensations of the breath. Be curious about the texture, the way it's changing. This can help to add engagement, help to keep the breath in the center, in the foreground. take your time here, coming out of the meditation. Very gently start to move the body again. Open the eyes. Return back to engaging with the world. But as you do, notice if that quality of attention and awareness continues. Almost never practice somewhere this quiet. One thing I was thinking then is this practice is actually probably easiest to begin with sounds. So if you're focusing on the breath and you can hear sounds come and go in the background, that's easier than if you start with it's quiet out there and there's just a lot of thoughts. But it's the same idea. Especially if you can get that sense of the thoughts coming and going, almost like sound arises and passes. That's a great practice as well. But yeah, you may or may not have got a sense of that in that session. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you all. How's that? What was your experience like? What questions do you have?
Yeah, so I'm not a regular meditator. What I find difficult is when I try and focus on the object, I kind of fall asleep all the time.
Yeah.
It's so tough. I'm another world, in a dream world at times, so that's my challenge.
Yeah. So did you say you do have a regular practice?
No, I don't.
You don't. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I actually wanted to talk about this. I would love to, can we get like a show of hands or something? I guess a lot of people don't have their cameras on. Anyway, I'll just say falling asleep is a very common thing that happens. I also find sleepiness, it just keeps coming back for me as well, especially, certain times of day or if I'm a bit tired. And there's actually three kinds of sleepiness, three reasons sleepiness comes in, or even full-on falling asleep. One is that you're actually tired, you need sleep. The second is that the practice is actually going well, and because the mind is calming a bit, and our bodies, our habitual conditioning is if we're relaxed and our eyes are closed, we fall asleep. The third one doesn't seem to apply in this case. I think it sounds like it's more that it's actually going well. So I can talk about that. But the third one I'll just mention for anyone else interested is if there's something the mind doesn't want to see. So it's a kind of a mechanism the mind can go into sleepiness instead of looking at something that is painful or difficult. So yeah, in terms of falling asleep, oftentimes when like developing a practice, the falling asleep is actually a sign that it's going well. There's relaxation there. And then the trick is to just bring in the balancing aspect of alertness, bring in a bit more clarity, a bit more energy. So yeah, I guess I'm curious, how do you feel about working with it? Do you want some tips of what to do when you are sleepy? Does it feel like it's coming along for you?
No, tips will help. It's very consistent. As soon as I kind of try to focus on something, I just...
Okay.
Yeah.
Like every time within 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Okay. And Like, yeah, do you feel like well, how is your sleep? Are you sleeping enough?
Not really.
Okay, so that could actually be considered part of your meditation practice if you can get more sleep. But just in terms of what you can do while in the practice, mostly it's going to be about posture and doing something physical to bring more alertness in. So there's actually a progression of instructions that I like to give that I learned, where you kind of start off with the smallest intervention, the smallest antidote, and then you get progressively bigger and stronger. So the smallest things is if you catch it very early, you might just be able to notice it, bring a bit more intention, a bit more energy to what you're paying attention to. If that's not, that might not be enough if you don't catch it early enough, then the next thing would be to take a few deeper breaths, sit up a bit straighter. Then the next one would be open the eyes, practice with the eyes open. Yeah, that is a very effective way to stay alert. And also it'll give you a lot of feedback. If you start going to sleep, you can see your eyelids closing and then you can wake yourself up again. And then beyond that, you can tense the muscles of the body and relax them. And that can sometimes bring a bit more alertness, or actually do standing meditation. So, even here as we were, you can just stand up and, it's not going to be very disruptive if you just stand up. Standing meditation, I think of it in terms of like the Qigong practice. So there's a Qigong practice of standing, and it's actually just a really helpful way to bring energy into the body. So it seems like it might be a very unusual thing to do, but it can be super helpful. You might only need to stand for 5 minutes and you can sit down again, and actually it feels better. How does that sound?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, any other thoughts, reflections on that meditation? Anyone want to share their experience?
Anyone online maybe? Had some.
I can share.
Yeah.
So I'm not unfamiliar with this. I feel like I'm very quickly just going to the concentration, and then you say, focus on one place, and then also balance that background awareness into this foreground concentration. I think I do that pretty well. And then I think in the middle of the section, the lights start to appear. And then so the white or start to change to magenta or gold, something like that. And what I'm curious, when I sit very long enough, such as 40 minutes later, I can get into the first stage of the samadhi, which is one pointness. And then it's like all of a sudden you become very focused right here. And then you just, as if your eyes is looking at here automatically by you. You can't force yourself just looking at here because you will have headache. But that first stage of samadhi is really bring you there. So that's my personal experience. And I'm also very curious about your entire meditation progress. When you stay long enough, and what will you experience?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, very cool. Sounds like you have a strong practice, dedicated practice. I'm not as familiar with that terminology. I learned about that practice in terms of the nimitta and luminous jhanas, which I did practice for some time, but is now not the focus of my practice.
Okay.
So yeah, my practice has actually diverged in a number of different ways since practicing, being very focused on concentration and on samadhi. And I would be happy to go into that. I just maybe a bit later or after the talk. I'm not sure how relevant it is to the talk and to everyone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything around what you're experiencing that I could help with?
I check your bio.
Yeah.
So, you work with Michael Tops. So he's mentioned about these jhanas, which I also incorporate with Um, I forgot. So it's focused on here, the anapanasati.
Mhm.
Yeah, focus on here. But initially I do it, but gradually I just follow the lights intuitively rather than just keep focusing on this meditation spot, anapanasati spot. But anyway, thank you. I would like to hear experience.
Yeah, that would be good for us to talk about later.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Is there anything online?
We do have someone sharing their experience online. They said, I often feel like my internal energy is moving, like swaying, almost as if I'm on a boat. Why is that, and what can I do to stabilize it?
Great. Okay, so this is internal energy that's moving, swaying
Yeah.
like you're on a boat.
Almost like I'm on a boat, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting, like the circles that I'm in, people come to meditation as like a way to calm the mind and de-stress. And it's scientific, right? Like it's been proven that this helps. And so it's like all evidence-based, scientific. And then after they practice a while, they start off very much like scientific, realist. And after they practice a while, it's like energy is real. I have to, I have to get my acupuncture therapist to talk to my shaman about my Reiki. Yeah, so energy phenomena does happen a lot, and it happens especially when the practice develops and the level of sensory clarity increases. So in the Buddhist tradition, we have the word piti, P-I-T-I in Pali, and this refers to quite a range of things: pleasure, joy, rapture, bliss. And it's also the word that we would tend to use for the experience of energy in the body. And so it's very common to start just noticing something that's kind of subtle. This was how it went for me. I was focusing on the breath, getting into qualities of mind that were very relaxed and calm. And then I just started noticing that there was this like subtle fluctuation that didn't move with the breath. It was slightly out of sync. And so then the practice, it was maybe a little off-putting, but also kind of pleasant, slightly pleasant. And so sometimes these energy experiences range widely. Sometimes they're very blissful, very pleasurable. Sometimes they're too much. Sometimes they involve involuntary movements, also known as kriyas in the tradition, where the body like twitches or you shake while you're meditating without intending to. And yeah, there's a whole range. But the thing that I would say around this is it's good to know that it's a thing that can happen and that it's actually kind of expected. The way of practicing with it tends to be that at first it might be distracting or it might be something that you are very curious about. But if you can see it a number of times, it becomes more just like a background experience. And over time, it tends to open up and to become more pleasurable and to be more in line with this idea of piti, which then will develop into sukha, happiness, pleasure, and then into calmness, peacefulness, and equanimity. So the advice I would give is if you're practicing in a way similar to what we just did, is actually to, you might look at the energy and enjoy it, enjoy the swaying, but then to actually just see if it's okay to leave that in the background, to let that energy movement happen in the background, to be just part of the full body experience, and to see how it develops over time. And if there is an experience that is difficult or uncomfortable, or it feels like you, it's swaying to the point where you would really like it to be different, it would be good to talk with a teacher and get some like personalized advice. but in most cases, it's going to settle and become smoother and more enjoyable. Okay, I hope that answered your question. If there's anything else, yeah, please follow that up. Yeah, if you want to ask anything else.
She actually followed up. She said, I actually get a bit frightened by it because if I focus on it, it can get really strong.
Yeah. Yes. So the energy, I kind of want to ask, is it strong in a pleasurable way or strong in just purely uncomfortable way?
And Pei, you can unmute or I can continue to read your messages, whatever you prefer. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh God, I turned on not allowing attendant to unmute because we're meditating, and she couldn't unmute. So yes, you can unmute.
Hello.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, I got a type because I couldn't unmute the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for answering my question. It's not pleasant or unpleasant. It depends on how I see it. If I look at it in a that it's weird and or something's wrong, then I get a bit frightened. Then it becomes unpleasant. But if I just think that it's normal or it's just a normal thing that happened during meditation, then I think I'm more at ease with it. So it's neither pleasant or unpleasant.
Yeah, thanks, Pei. So that's great that you're noticing that actually it's about how you relate to it, how you conceive of it, that actually brings in the unpleasant quality or when it becomes kind of scary. So maybe one thing I could say is, I know hundreds of people who have this experience.
Okay.
It's not that uncommon. It does range. People get different experiences, but there is a consistent pattern that it comes up. It can be a lot at times or unusual, but then over time it just becomes part of the experience of meditation.
Okay. Can I like try to stabilize it? Because I try to focus more on my contact with the chair and something more solid, then it kind of settles, like then it doesn't move as much. Is that how you would do it?
Yeah, so narrowly focusing on it will make it louder and stronger, and bringing more of an open, broad awareness will tend to make it smooth out. So I like what you're saying there, focusing on the chair, focusing on the stable body sensations. That will help it to be kind of balanced or grounded. The other thing that I would recommend for if you really want to smooth it out and make it more stable is a whole body awareness practice. So the energy movements, the swaying will feel like it's occurring somewhere in the body. I would actually try opening your awareness to the full body and allowing the feeling, the energy to feel like it kind of fills the whole body. And the broadness of that awareness can help to make that experience more stable and more steady.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So I feel like now might be a good time. I'll just talk a little bit more and then we'll have a bit more time for questions at the end. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I brought props. So you can see how this goes. So this is the elephant path. Who knows this? You've seen it? Okay, great. Can I hold it up here?
Yeah, I can show them to the camera.
Amazing. Thank you.
Actually,
That was kind of, I think that was working.
Yeah, that's best. Actually, yeah.
Okay. We don't need the details of it. If you're at
I can also
home,
take a photo.
yeah, if you're at home, you can Google elephant path as well. Normally it's bad karma to Google while in the middle of the Dharma talk, but
Oh, really?
I'm giving you permission. Oh, I'm that's kind of tongue in cheek. I'm joking.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is the elephant path. So basically, this is found on tankas, like especially in the Tibetan traditions, the Mahayana, the artworks and illustrations. And it shows a winding path with an elephant going up it at different positions. And there's a meditator behind the elephant or eventually riding the elephant. Behind the elephant, then in front, then riding the elephant. But this basically is a, sometimes it's talked about as the world's first infographic. It's an illustration that actually gives information about the stages of shamatha practice, the stages of calm abiding. Amazing, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll just put this here. People in the space can see. Okay, so the reason I wanted to show this is this illustration is probably from somewhere around like 500 Common Era. So it's like pretty old. And this describes these stages of meditation. And the stages seem relatively consistent even with modern minds. So the things that they talk about in the stages, the different problems you're likely to get, they seem to be quite consistent even with what we experience now. The other reason I wanted to bring this in is, there's a book called The Mind Illuminated, which was released in about 2015. So pretty new, relatively new compared to this. And this describes it's a meditation manual. It describes the practice of shamatha in great detail. The book is like 500 pages long. The joke there is that the Mind Illuminated, the abbreviation would be TMI, which could also stand for too much information. But I feel like the amount of information was actually very helpful for me. It gave a lot of very precise instruction about how to move through the stages. And if you compare this to something like the Anapanasati Sutta, which is a beautiful sutta, wonderful teaching of the Buddha, but the instruction there is not very detailed. I printed it off before, it's 4 pages long. And also like the instruction, it kind of tells you what a progression is, but it doesn't tell you how to do it so much or how to work with sleepiness or anything like that. Okay, so the stages of shamatha described in this book, The Mind Illuminated, and probably the main invention of this book, the main piece of new knowledge is this idea of attention and awareness, balancing foreground and background. And so we have that idea, and I think that's actually very helpful for practicing in this modern busy world. I took the train here, and I was taking the train from the inner west, and there were a lot of very loud children and teenagers on the train. And it was really great to practice with this in this way, that busy cafe idea of just bringing attention to the breath and letting all of this happen in the background and noticing whenever attention went to those things, just gently bringing it back, just allowing that awareness to be open, but as much as possible, letting whatever arises come and go. Now, I just wanted to describe the first few stages of this elephant path. So there's 10 stages in the Mind Illuminated. So I'll talk a little bit about the higher stages, and then I'll give a detailed description of the first few stages. Basically, no, I should do them in order. I think that makes more sense. So stage 1 is really about establishing a practice. And this is just sitting, getting time, doing the meditation practice. If possible, building up momentum, consistency. Stage 2 is where attention is with distractions more than it is with your meditation object. And I'll say the breath in this case, but you can actually substitute different meditation objects. So stage 2 is where you're trying to get the breath to be on the meditation object more of the time. You might even find that it's like 75% of the time your attention is away. No problem. Just keep noticing, gently bringing it back. Stage 3 is really where the sleepiness comes in. So, once things have settled down a bit, then sleepiness arises, but also where there is like big distraction, gross distraction. So this could be, it goes into mind wandering or a distraction that's so big that it really pulls you away from the meditation object for some time. And there's a few specific techniques to work with that. So at stage 3, working with big distraction and the sleepiness. Stage 4 is where we're basically doing the practice that we did just before, where you've got your attention on the meditation object and allowing everything else to be in the background. And if you can practice this and get some stability with it, eventually it sort of feels like the breath never completely leaves. Like you do get distracted. So the breath is normally here. You get distracted and the breath goes somewhere over here, but you still know it's there. Never completely lose it. And at that point, this is where meditation starts to get, fun and interesting. And some of you have experienced this, where there's enough stability that the mind does start to calm down and meditation becomes more enjoyable. And it might feel like there's something happening. There's a sense of progress. Okay, so I'll just give a very brief overview of the stages after that. If you can get stable attention on the breath, relatively stable, so the breath doesn't ever completely go away, or if it does, it's not for very long, then you can work on increasing sensory clarity. And so the way this was taught to me is by doing a body scan, but looking for very small, subtle sensations, looking for the sensations right at the edge of your perception. And by doing so, you really sharpen your attention. You can notice more detail. Stage 6 is what I was talking about before with the alternating attention. Stage 6 is where you actually decide the alternation's not helpful anymore. And you kind of create a frame around the meditation object and don't let attention move out of that frame. And that's where you bring in a lot of precision with the practice. Stage 7 is kind of a transition of actually releasing effort. So stage 8 is then the practice has become effortless. The mind stays with the breath without having to do too much, just through intention. The mind stays with the meditation object. Stage 9 is when there's a great deal of joy and bliss that comes from this effortlessness, and it needs time to kind of calm down and settle. And then stage 10 is where that bliss becomes, the bliss actually has turned to equanimity, and that equanimity and tranquility becomes something that you take with you off the cushion as well. And so those higher stages are they sound kind of lofty, but definitely possible with strong, consistent home practice or on retreat. And some of you who've been on retreat actually would have experienced moving through the progression here just through the container of continuing to practice. So the reason I bring this up is that it was so helpful for me to know that there was a progression, that there were clear steps that thousands, if not millions of people had gone through before, and that got benefit from it, and that it was possible for me to do it, and that just through learning some techniques and tips and tools, I could also do this practice and explore this. And then when I started reading, I was reading about it, and when I started seeing the things in the teaching show up in my practice, that gave me a lot of confidence. Oh yeah, I am noticing that there are big distractions, and I can start to work with them through doing these techniques, or I'm noticing my sensory clarity increasing. And so just to go back to the meditation we did, there were sort of 3 main tools that we used. One is, and if you have the image, you can see this also depicted in the image. One is the rope of mindfulness. So this is the rope that's being thrown over the elephant. And this is bringing attention back to the meditation object. The second is he has like a hook or like a goad. And this is awareness, but also like metacognitive awareness. So knowing what is happening in the mind and being able to direct things back. The third thing is in the image, this is flames. The flames are, partly indicative of this, but that's the intensifying that we talked about. So bringing more curiosity, bringing more interest, more care to the meditation object so that you can stay with it for longer periods of time. Okay, and so maybe just a final point to wrap that up is I believe these tools and techniques, yes, they do take time and practice, but can be so useful for cultivating this quality of calm abiding, cultivating the quality of samadhi, even to any degree, and how beneficial that is for our lives. And yeah, I believe that through this practice, particularly of attention and awareness, we can notice how that operates and be able to practice in what might have previously been thought of as challenging circumstances, places that are noisy, when the mind is full of thoughts, when there's a lot going on. And also that, through these teachings, I believe it's also very possible for us to learn this technique, to learn the practice. It's possible, it's there if you want to explore it. And maybe a thought of, something you can try out when you leave here. If you are taking the train, you can practice this on the train, notice the sounds, let them be in the background while you keep your attention resting on a meditation object. If you're walking around after this, you can notice where your attention goes and how attention moves, and notice what's in the background and what moves from the background to the foreground. If you're driving, be careful. Keep attention where it needs to go. But it can be really interesting to notice, as you're driving, you're also feeling like what it feels like to be sitting, things like that. But try to keep attention where it's required to be safe. Okay, that's I've talked a bunch. So I'd love to hear any questions, comments, thoughts. Floor is open.
I guess I can kick us off.
Yeah.
So when you say calm abiding practice, is there also elements of analytical / vipassana elements where it's like the mind is it at the stage where the mind is calm enough that you start investigating the sensations? Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
Great question. Yeah, amazing. So the technique that I learned is described as śamatha vipassana, like a hybrid practice. And if at first, if you're reading the book or you're following these instructions, you might think it's mostly concerned with shamatha, right? It's like, where is the vipassana in that? So there's two ways that the vipassana comes in. One is that, when we're talking about vipassana, I'm talking about it very broadly as insight, any practices that help to create understanding and wisdom. So two ways that vipassana comes in. One is that learning how to move the mind will require insight into the mind. So if you're able to understand the practice and to work with what is coming up and to successfully navigate what's coming up in the mind, that will create a certain kind of insight that's going to be very helpful. And so one of the very simple point, but very powerful for me in my practice, and I've seen it being helpful for others as well, is that even when you're very distracted, there's a sort of insight there of noticing that the thoughts so maybe there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of thinking happening, but noticing that you didn't decide to have the thoughts. The thoughts are just there. And when you practice, you can see that, oh, my intention was to stay with meditation object. Thoughts arose. Who created the thoughts? And to see the thoughts as like, oh yeah, the thoughts are coming up because of, causes and conditions. They're just there. They're just happening. You don't have to take it so personally. And even that, at a very, just noticing that and tuning into that, even when, it feels like, and this might be a very early insight, and that's can be so helpful. The second way Vipassana comes in is if you are able to progress to something like stage 6, stage 7, stage 8. Stage 8 is where the effortless quality is really present. The mind will be a very finely tuned tool for doing basically any Vipassana practice. So oftentimes it will happen spontaneously at that point because of all the calm and clarity that's present. The mind will pick up on different experiences that are happening, and they'll be very fruitful in that way. There'll be an understanding gained from that. For people who, for whatever reason, maybe don't have enough time to practice, or various life circumstances, if that isn't available, then even just practicing up to wherever you can, and then doing the Vipassana practice will also help as well. So, what I was talking about with what we did today, that kind of stage 4, just stabilizing attention enough, that will also prepare the mind for doing Vipassana practice, insight practice.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions, person or online? What people think of questions? I have another question. So gotta, prepare, not prepare, but I do have questions actually genuinely. This is very interesting, this talk. So with our practices, craving can arise in terms of for example, jhanas, craving for jhana, pleasant experiences with practices such as this potentially craving for the next stage, or even potentially pride, which is I've achieved this, I'm a good meditator. All of those are very common sort of hindrances that can arise in our practice. Is there anything that the book or your practice also talks about that as a hindrance?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yes, that does happen. And it's really interesting to think about how the ego can become attached to anything. But particularly if we are, this is a map, right?
Yeah.
And anytime we're looking at a map, it's telling us about all the places we are not. So, the joke is that there's a great saying. It's the title of Ram Dass's book. It's "Be Here Now," and the joke is that people practicing in this very pragmatic way. It's all about being somewhere else later.
Yes.
So yeah, this does come up absolutely, so in the book, and in the way I was taught it, in my practice, the way I teach it, I would say, actually the community that I've been a part of, it's interesting that actually the problem that seems to arise the most is perfectionism, trying to perfect a certain stage before moving on, or even reading ahead or trying the next stage. And so that is something to watch out for. The problem of becoming attached or wanting to get somewhere else or craving for a different state. Yeah, there's a couple of things I would suggest there. So one is that if you are in communication with other practitioners, that will be really helpful. So if you're in a Sangha, you're talking with a teacher, you just have friends that you can talk to this about, that will really help. Sometimes it just reveals things about what's happening that we didn't know ourselves when you say them out loud or someone asks you a nice question. The next thing would be, to recognize the craving. And often that will be quite distinct when doing this kind of practice. So the craving for a particular state will often show up as something that blocks the qualities of calm that are coming. So you can notice it within the practice. And I think that the thing that resolves this is actually practicing over time and seeing that the state that the mind is in, the quality of mind that's present, is also not really up to you. Just like the thoughts that arise. If you sort of, maybe for me, it was sort of, I made some progress, then I went back. Then I made a bit of progress, then I went back. And what I noticed is it wasn't just through my will or my wanting it to be different that I could decide to be in a certain state of mind. It was really about all the conditions that went into that. And again, that made it feel somewhat impersonal, or at least I didn't take it personally. And I think that's really the insight that helps resolve this. But yeah, good thing to know and to watch out for. The flip side of that, of course, is that there can be a lot of motivation and inspiration from this. So we don't want to throw that out. We just want to be wary of like, okay, is this motivating and inspiring, or is it veering into something that becomes more craving, clinging?
Very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Oh, we had a comment from Sing Sing. He said, Sing Sing turned on his camera. He said, thank you so much, Kynan, very helpful. Sorry, I have my camera turned off because I'm in bed with COVID, but hope to see you again in the future. Oh, Sing Sing is our Dharma Deva who invites all the teachers, but he's off with COVID right now. Hope you feel better soon.
Hope you feel better, Sensei.
Thank you for still joining us, even though you're not feeling well. Hope this is providing you with some relief. You can pay attention to this talk whilst being aware of your sickness in the background. Yeah, are there any other questions? Yeah, so it sounds like this practice also allows like insights to spontaneous arrive. I'm really curious at the later stages, what's the purpose? Like why does and I don't know if you should even talk about it at this point, because many of us we're not at that stage, but I'm just curious why we're kind of gating the mind for certain vicinities instead of just I guess watching the breath.
Yeah.
As before.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I described that quite briefly before, so I can go into it in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
So basically the way I think of this is in this sort of initial stages, it's actually totally fine if there is a bit of dullness and a bit of distraction, and that doesn't actually impede what's happening. And in fact, it can actually be kind of good to have, for example, a bit of dullness. Like that can help. The relaxing quality of that is actually not a problem at that stage. And so the technique here is really about solving the problems or working on the different areas in the order that matters or the order that's most helpful. So when we're thinking about that, like alternating attention, that's actually not really a problem, because what's happening is, our attention's on the breath, and then it goes over to some thought or some feeling, and it comes back, and that like lets us know that that's there, and over time, we develop the metacognitive quality where knowing where attention is going and we can just come back. It's not a problem. Doesn't stop us from developing that stability. When we get into, so stage 5 is where we develop a lot of sensory clarity. We're increasing the detail, the resolution. And then stage 6 is where we actually want to get to the point of exclusive attention.
Oh.
So attention only stays with one thing for extended periods of time. And so the reason for this is that when we can get to the point where attention stops alternating, it's kind of like that alternating takes up a bit of energy. And if we don't alternate, the energy more builds up. An analogy that gets used here is it's like a capacitor that when we feed the energy into it, it builds up and builds up and builds up. But what happens when the energy builds up is it creates a lot of joy and bliss, but also it feeds back into the stability. So we kind of lock in and become very engaged, maybe even kind of absorbed into the meditation object. And so the instruction here is that in stage 5, we increase the sensory clarity. And also I do want to mention that from the reports I'm hearing, I think many of you would be totally ready to try these practices. I don't think you need to assume that this is beyond where you're at. Definitely consider it, and you can always try. It's a low-cost experiment to maybe try it out and just see what happens. Low-cost experiment and nothing bad can happen. So what's happened is we've built up a lot of sensory clarity in stage 5. And what that does is it reveals how attention alternates. And some people even come back at this point and say, oh, I've forgotten how to meditate. I've got so many more distractions. And it's actually not that there's more distractions, but they now can notice it. Their clarity has got to the point where they know the mind is moving, when previously it was more just like it was moving, but it was mostly there. So if you take a vague idea, it's like, oh yeah, that's stable. So the instruction for stage 6 is really to bring attention to the meditation object and aim for this exclusive attention. Try to really increase that precision, and through intention, stay with the breath or whatever meditation object to the point where it's not alternating as much at all, and eventually the alternating stops, and you're really absorbed into that meditation object. And it might at that point take on a lot more richness and vividness and clarity, and you kind of zoom into it. And so one technique that I like to suggest is that idea of the frame. That imagery was just helpful for me to imagine, like, okay, I'm putting a frame around it, and it's just within that frame that the attention is moving. Another way you could think about it is that, just the amount of time that attention is with the object is increasing and increasing. And that is the point where, the mind starts to really lock in and prepare for the effortlessness that comes shortly after.
So is there like a sort of almost like, what's the difference between, say, initially the instruction is you're focusing, I guess the attention is placed on this part of your breath, and then you're aware of everything else. And then at this stage, it's kind of like we're no longer encouraged to have the background awareness. It's mostly just awareness of the breath.
Oh,
Is that sort of
you should still have background awareness at this point. Yeah, it's just that the background awareness is still there doing its thing.
Yeah.
But it's just really, I'm talking about it from the perspective of awareness, like really focusing in, narrowing in on that.
Yeah. So it's almost, would it be correct to say it's like your intention is less so, because almost when you start meditating, it's like you're either like completely on the breath or you're completely distracted. And so as we train, it's like aware of the breath and also have the background awareness. And so, but yeah, like that's just not
Yeah.
and then at what point, sorry, it's like, okay, you actually know how to have background awareness now. Don't actually have the intention to be aware of the background anymore. Actually, you should be more placing focus on having this.
Yeah, that is one way to think about it, that the background awareness is automatic at that point.
Yeah, okay.
Another way to think about it would be through developing up to that point, you're increasing the power of mindfulness. So it's not just that you balance between attention and awareness, you actually get more of both. And so then at a certain point, you've increased the power of mindfulness to the point where it functions kind of differently. It allows you to do this next step.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find in the later stage, it becomes very heavy. You can't even think about something else. That, it's like you are completely drawn into that, the heaviness there. Even you try to think about something, you couldn't think about it. That, the heaviness is there.
Yeah. So that,
The concentration is there.
yeah, that would be when concentration leads more into absorption.
Yeah.
And yeah, that can be, if that's your intention, then going into that and enjoying it.
How do you then? My subsequent question is, how do you break that 1 hour mark? I find when I usually come to the heaviness, it's around an hour or so after meditation, the progressive meditation. How do you break that an hour mark? You just keep doing it. How do you break that?
Oh,
I mean, for instance, sometimes I feel it's very interesting. Sometimes you just been awake by, okay, you need to go to sleep, or you need to do something. An hour later, you're automatically awake by something.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you're getting into an absorption state,
Yeah.
and then at some point you just pop out,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, that's done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I need to go to sleep anyway.
Yeah. So in the tradition, they say that you should, before you enter the absorption, you should intend for how long you want to stay, and you gradually increase that intention. It's not a practice I've done a whole lot, but yeah, that would be something you could explore.
Yeah.
What is the intention going into it? And then during that time, if you're not even able to have thoughts, you will just pop out at a certain point. And then what you do is you see if you can accurately have that intention and then increase the time. Great.
I think we
Time?
have time
Yep.
at 30. So would you like to end with a dedication? Right?
Absolutely. Okay. So like to dedicate the merit from this practice. Let all the merit that we've gathered contribute to a great cloud of merit that helps all beings reach the freedom from suffering. May any benefits that we experience from the practice ripple out to all of those around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kynan. Oh, we have thank you from Barrett too. Thank you to Kynan and all those who have contributed to this event. Thank you, Kynan, for coming and joining us in person to share your experience of meditation, your teachings to guide us on how to calm this wild elephant, which is the wild mind, and appreciate your advice for each of our individual practices, as well as answering our questions for our future practice, what we can experiment with, what may benefit us, and what we can also try on the trains and in our daily life, which is something that as lay people, like we short on time, so that's really, really useful to know the different ways we can practice both on the seat and also in our daily lives. We'd love to have you come back again. Pei also said thank you, Kynan. Loved having you here. I think we all really enjoyed it, and thank you to everyone who also contributed to this session, asking questions, sharing your experiences, and I hope that was helpful for all of you as well. So yeah, with that, we also thank you. Nikki also said, thank you very much for a very informative talk and lovely dedication. Thank you. Lovely. Yeah, awesome. And with that, this is the final Wednesday event of this year. Oh, not gonna see you guys again next year until next year. But yeah, hope everyone have a lovely holidays, Christmas, New Year break, a restorative time for all of you to be with your loved ones. And we'll see you again in the coming year. I don't exactly know which day we're coming back. Keep in touch on the Meta Center Friends WhatsApp group, or you can also check on our email mailing list and our website. We'll have updated information about when we're coming back. Next year we'll have the usual schedule. We'll have Monday meditation. Wait, are we changing next year? We're not changing, not yet. Okay. Well, no changes announced yet, but we'll still have Monday meditations, Wednesday wisdom talk, Tuesday yoga, and monthly Sunday family days. We also will be celebrating 10 years anniversary next year. So we're gonna do a big event. We're gonna invite all the teachers who spoke at Meta Center from around the world and in Sydney, and we want to invite them, all of them together from all traditions to join a mega event. We're going to give them mega dana, which is like big dana for all the teachers. We already have teachers that's joining from overseas, so I'll look forward to that. That's going to be in November. So yeah, we'll keep you posted. All right, so nothing else. Yep. All right, lovely evening. Hope you all have a good night. Happy holidays. Take care of yourself and goodbye. Until next year.